In the heart of Las Vegas, a luxury hotel known for its world-class service and upscale clientele is about to face an unexpected twist. When a man sporting a bright red MAGA hat steps into the grand lobby, his presence immediately draws whispers and side glances from the staff and other guests. The front desk clerk, uneasy with the bold symbol, hesitates and ultimately refuses to accommodate him, citing the hotel's commitment to inclusivity. Little does she know, the man she just turned away isn't just another guest, he's the owner of the entire hotel chain. And this moment is about to spark a wave of revelations and lessons no one saw coming. The Las Vegas Strip sparkled under the desert sun, its towering hotels casting long shadows across the bustling sidewalks. Neon signs flashed promises of indulgence, entertainment, and escape. Among the throngs of tourists and locals, a man quietly approached them, entrance of one of the city's most prestigious luxury hotels. He was an unassuming figure. His simple attire, a weathered leather jacket, jeans, and a bright red MAGA, had contrasting starkly against the polished sophistication of the towering glass building. He stopped for a moment at the edge of the grand circular driveway, adjusting the strap of his worn duffel bag and glancing up at the massive sign above the hotel's entrance. His face, though lined with age and experience, held a quiet dignity to any passerby. He looked like an ordinary traveler, perhaps a middle-aged man with modest means, visiting the city for a brief reprieve from his life back home. But to him, this place was more than just another stop. It was his legacy. As he stepped through the revolving glass doors, he was greeted by the sounds of soft jazz playing in the background and the gentle hum of conversation. The hotel lobby was an architectural marvel, a blend of sleek modernity and timeless elegance. Marble floors gleamed under the cascading light from a crystal chandelier. Velvet chairs and leather couches dotted the room, occupied by guests sipping cocktails and checking their phones. The scent of fresh-cut flowers and high-end cologne lingered in the air. Despite the opulence, an unspoken tension seemed to ripple through the space as he crossed the room. Conversations quieted, eyes darted toward him, and subtle whispers spread like wildfire. The redhead perched on his head the now iconic "Make America Great Again" emblem stitched boldly across the front was not just an accessory. It was a symbol that carried decades of controversy, division, and emotion. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others openly stared, their faces betraying disapproval. The man was no stranger to such reactions. He'd seen the stares before, felt the weight of judgment from strangers who didn't know him, who assumed his entire character based on a single piece of clothing. But he had learned long ago to carry himself with quiet confidence, to keep his head high even as the world around him seemed to close in. This day was no different, or so he thought. As he approached the front desk, the clerk, a young woman with a polished appearance and a tight bun, glanced up at him. Her professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she quickly regained composure. "Good afternoon, sir," she said, her tone polite but distant. "Welcome to the Grand Empress. Do you have a reservation?" The man placed his duffel bag down gently and pulled out a printed confirmation. "Yes, I have a room booked for 2 nights," he replied, his voice calm and steady. He slid the paper across the counter. The clerk glanced at it briefly, then back at him. Her smile wavered again. "Just a moment," she said, turning to her computer. Her manicured nails tapped against the keyboard as she pulled up his booking. As she read the screen, her expression shifted, her brow furrowing slightly. She looked back at him, her gaze flicking briefly to the hat before meeting his eyes again. "I'm sorry, sir, but—" She hesitated, as though searching for the right words. "I'm afraid there's been an issue with your reservation." The man tilted his head slightly, his calm demeanor unshaken. "An issue? What kind of issue?" The clerk swallowed, glancing over her shoulder at another employee before leaning closer to him, lowering her voice. "It's just that we've had some incidents in the past. Guests expressing concerns about certain attire. We have a policy to ensure all our guests feel comfortable." And unfortunately, her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. "Are you saying I can't stay here because of my hat?" he asked, his voice low but firm. The clerk straightened, her professionalism flickering as discomfort crept into her expression. "It's not personal, sir. It's just, we tried to maintain a certain atmosphere. I hope you understand. For a moment, the man said nothing. He simply studied her, his gaze steady and unwavering. Around them, the lobby seemed to grow quieter, the weight of the exchange drawing the attention of nearby guests and staff. The clerk shifted under his gaze, her polished confidence slipping. "I see," he said finally, his tone even. He picked up his duffel bag and stepped aside, allowing another guest to approach the counter. The clerk let out a quiet breath of relief, her attention quickly shifting to the next customer. But the man didn't leave the lobby. Instead, he moved to a quiet corner, setting his bag down and taking a seat in one of the leather armchairs. From his vantage point, he could see the entire lobby, the bustling staff, the guests milling about, the glittering chandeliers casting golden light across the room. He had spent years of his life building this empire, pouring his blood, sweat, and tears into every detail. This hotel, and the others like it, had been his dream, a place where people from all walks of life could come together, united by a shared desire for comfort and luxury. But now, standing in the very place he had created, he felt like a stranger. He adjusted his hat, the fabric worn and faded from years of wear. To him, it was more than just a political statement. It was a symbol of his beliefs, his values, and the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had always known it would be controversial, but he had never imagined it would make him unwelcome in his own home. A young bellboy approached him hesitantly, his uniform crisp and neatly pressed. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly. "I couldn't help but overhear. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened. I don't think they realize who you are." The man looked up at the bellboy, his expression softening. "It's not your fault, son," he said, his voice kind. "But thank you." The bellboy nodded, his face earnest. "If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." The man gave him a small smile. "You've already done more than enough." As the bellboy walked away, the man leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He thought of the years he had spent building this business, the sacrifices he had made, the sleepless nights spent worrying about every detail. And now, it seemed, all of it had been reduced to a single moment, a single piece of fabric that had become a lightning rod for division and judgment. He glanced toward the front desk, where the clerk was now laughing and chatting with another guest. She had no idea who he was, no idea that the man she had turned away was the very reason she had a job, the very reason this hotel even existed. But he didn't feel anger toward her. Instead, he felt a deep, aching sadness, a sadness for the world they lived in, where a person's worth could be measured by a hat, a symbol, or an assumption. Taking a deep breath, he stood, his resolve hardening. This was not the time to dwell on what had happened. There was work to be done, lessons to be taught, and changes to be made. And if there was one thing he had learned in his years of building an empire, it was this: sometimes the greatest challenges were the ones that came from within. As he stepped toward the exit, the faint sound of murmured whispers followed him, but he paid them no mind. The neon lights of the Las Vegas Strip awaited him, and with them, the promise of a new chapter where understanding and empathy might finally take root. Even in the unlikeliest of places, the streets outside the hotel buzzed with life as the man stepped into the evening air, the warm glow of the setting sun casting long shadows across the pavement. Tourists laughed and snapped pictures, taxicabs honked, and performers lined the street corners, their music and tricks vying for attention. Yet, amidst the chaos, the man stood still, gripping the worn handle of his duffel bag as the weight of what had just transpired settled over him. The Grand Empress Hotel, his hotel, loomed behind him, its gleaming glass facade reflecting the world he had worked so hard to build. He could still feel the sting of rejection, the subtle yet unmistakable dismissal of his worth. Not for who he was, but for what he wore. It wasn't the first time he had faced judgment, but this time it cut deeper. This was his creation, his dream brought to life, and yet he had been treated like a stranger, an intruder in a place that existed because of him. He leaned against a lamppost, the din of the Las Vegas Strip fading into the background. As memories began to surface, he thought back to the early days, when the hotel was nothing more than a sketch on a napkin and a glimmer of hope in his mind. Those were the days when he had poured everything he had into building something that could stand the test of time, something that could bring people together, regardless of who they were or where they came from. He had envisioned a place where luxury met inclusivity, where every guest felt like they belonged. And now, here he was, standing on the outside looking in. A group of tourists passed by, their chatter breaking his reverie. One of them, a man in his early 20s, paused to glance at him, his gaze lingering on the red hat perched on the older man's head. The young man's lips curled into a sneer before he turned back to his friends, laughing as they walked away. The older man exhaled slowly, his grip tightening on his duffel bag. He had seen that look too many times before, the look of someone who had already made up their mind, who saw the hat and nothing else. But it wasn't just the stares or the whispers that weighed on him. It was the feeling of being misunderstood, of knowing that people didn't see the person beneath the symbol. To him, the hat wasn't just a political statement. It was a reminder of his journey, of the values that had guided him through life: hard work, perseverance, and the belief that anyone could achieve their dreams if they were willing to fight for them. But to others, it was something else entirely: a badge of division, a lightning rod for controversy. He began to walk, his steps slow and measured as he made his way down the strip. The lights of the casinos and theaters flashed around him, their neon glow illuminating the crowd that surged past. He passed by street performers juggling fire, couples holding hands, and families posing for pictures in front of the famous fountains. Yet, despite the liveliness around him, he felt an overwhelming sense of isolation, as though he were moving through a world that no longer had a place for him. His thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of his phone. He pulled it from his pocket and glanced at the screen. It was an email, one of many he received daily as the owner of one of the most successful hotel chains in the country. He almost ignored it, but something made him pause. The subject line read, "Urgent, social media response needed." Curious, he opened the email and began to read. It was from the hotel's public relations team, alerting him to a post that had begun to gain traction online. A guest had tweeted about the incident at the Grand Empress, describing how a man in a MAGA hat had been turned away by the staff. The post was already starting to go viral, with hundreds of comments pouring and some applauding the hotel for its stance, others condemning it for discriminating against the man. He scrolled through the comments, his jaw tightening as he read the harsh words being thrown around on both sides. Some called him a symbol of hate, while others praised him for standing firm in his beliefs. But no one saw him for who he truly was. No one asked about the person behind the hat, about the life he had lived or the reasons he had chosen to wear it. It was all too easy for people to label, to judge, to assume. As he stood there staring at the screen, he felt a surge of emotions: anger, sadness, frustration. But beneath it all was something deeper, a resolve to turn this moment into something more than just another viral controversy. This wasn't just about him. It was about the culture they were all living in, a culture where division had become the norm, and understanding was increasingly rare. He tucked his phone back into his pocket and continued walking. His steps quickened as a plan began to form in his mind. He would return to the hotel not as a guest, but as the owner. He would confront the staff, not with anger, but with the truth. They needed to understand the values that the Grand Empress was built on, the vision that had guided him from the very beginning. And perhaps, in doing so, he could show them and the world that unity was still possible, even in a time of such deep division. But first, he needed time to reflect. He found a quiet bench away from the crowds and sat down, his duffel bag resting at his feet. He gazed out at the city, its lights twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. He thought about the people who had helped him build his empire: the architects, the designers, the staff who had believed in his vision. He thought about the countless guests who had walked through the doors of his hotels, each one bringing their own stories, their own hopes and dreams. And he thought about the young woman at the front desk, who had turned him away without a second thought. He couldn't blame her. She was a product of her environment, just like everyone else. She had been taught to judge, to categorize, to see the hat and not the man. But he also knew that change was possible. He had seen it before, in the small acts of kindness that had shaped his journey, in the moments of connection that had reminded him of the shared humanity that bound them all together. As the night wore on, the man remained on the bench, lost in thought. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be backlash, misunderstandings, and resistance. But he also knew that this was a moment worth fighting for. This was his chance to make a statement not with words or symbols, but with actions. And so, as the city lights flickered around him, the man made a silent vow. He would return to the Grand Empress, not as a victim of judgment, but as a messenger of change. He would remind the staff of the values that had built the hotel, of the dream that had brought it to life, and perhaps, in doing so, he could spark a conversation that went beyond politics, beyond division, and into the heart of what it meant to truly see and understand one another. The next morning, the man stood in front of the gleaming glass doors of the Grand Empress Hotel once again, his silhouette framed against the rising Las Vegas sun. The polished chrome handle of his duffel bag glinted in the light as he adjusted his grip, his face calm yet resolute. This time, he wasn't walking in as a guest, but as the man who had brought this hotel and so many others like it into existence. The tension in his chest was undeniable, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of knowing he was about to confront a system of judgment that extended far beyond this lobby. He stepped through the revolving doors, the familiar hum of the lobby greeting him. The luxurious space looked the same as it had the day before, guests mingling on velvet couches, staff moving efficiently between the front desk and concierge stations, and the soft murmur of classical music wafting through the air. But this time, the man's eyes were sharper, his focus unyielding. He wasn't here to blend in. He was here to make himself known. As he approached the front desk, he noticed the same young woman from the day before. Her polished demeanor was intact, her hair pulled tightly into a bun, her uniform immaculate. She greeted the next guest in line with a warm smile. Seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing behind her, the man waited patiently for his turn, the calm before the inevitable confrontation. When the line dwindled and the desk was clear, he stepped forward. The clerk looked up, and her eyes widened slightly in recognition. The professional smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. "Good morning," she said, her tone careful, as though she were speaking to a potential problem. "How can I assist you today?" The man placed his duffel bag gently on the floor, his hands steady as he reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his identification, a sleek black card embossed with gold lettering that bore the insignia of the Grand Empress Hotel, chain, and slid it across the counter. "I believe we need to have a conversation," he said, his voice even but firm. The clerk's expression shifted from confusion to shock as she glanced at the card. Her eyes darted to the name printed on it, then back to his face. I don't understand," she stammered. The man's gaze was unwavering. "I think you do." Before she could respond, the hotel manager appeared from around the corner, his sharp suit and confident stride marking him as the authority on duty. He had clearly been called in to address what the staff likely perceived as a situation. His eyes locked onto the man, and his smile was one of polite dismissal until he saw the card lying on the counter. The color drained from the manager's face. "Mr. Reynolds," he said, his voice faltering slightly. I didn't realize you were here." The man, now revealed as the owner of the Grand Empress hotel chain, folded his arms across his chest. "Apparently, a lot of people didn't realize who I am." "That's not the problem." His tone was calm, but there was no mistaking the gravity of his words. "The problem is what happened yesterday and why it happened." The manager swallowed hard, his composed exterior beginning to crack. "I assure you, sir, this must be a misunderstanding," he began. But Mr. Reynolds cut him off with a raised hand. "A misunderstanding? Let me explain something to you." He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering, forcing both the manager and the clerk to listen intently. "This hotel exists because I dreamed of creating a place where everyone could feel welcome. That's what I built this business on. And yet, yesterday, I was turned away because of a hat." The clerk's face turned red, and the manager shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure how to respond. The other staff nearby were now watching. Their curiosity peaked as the tension in the room grew palpable. "I built this hotel," Mr. Reynolds continued, his voice rising slightly, "not for people to judge each other, but for people to find comfort, luxury, and respect. And instead, I walked in here yesterday and was made to feel like I didn't belong." The clerk opened her mouth as if to speak, but quickly closed it, her guilt written plainly across her face. The manager took a small step forward. "Sir, I deeply apologize. If I had known who you were." "That's the problem, isn't it?" Mr. Reynolds interrupted, his tone sharp now. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me or anyone else with respect. That's not how this works." The lobby had grown silent. Guests were beginning to notice the exchange, their whispers filling the edges of the room. The clerk looked down, tears brimming in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to." "It's not just about me," Mr. Reynolds said, softening his tone as he turned to her. "It's about the culture we've allowed to take root here. This isn't just your mistake. It's a failure of leadership, of values. And it's my responsibility to fix it." The manager nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. I'll make sure this never happens again." "No," Reynolds said firmly. "It's not about making sure it doesn't happen again. It's about changing the way we see people. This isn't a policy problem. It's a people problem." He turned to the staff now gathered around the desk, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I want every single one of you to hear this. What happened yesterday wasn't just wrong. It was the opposite of what this hotel stands for. We're not here to judge people by what they wear or where they come from. We're here to welcome them, to treat them with dignity and respect, no matter what." A young bellboy who had been standing off to the side stepped forward, his expression earnest. "I tried to tell them, sir," he said quietly. "I knew there was something more to you." Mr. Reynolds smiled faintly, nodding at the young man. "And I appreciate that. You showed the kind of compassion and understanding that this hotel was built on. You represent what this place should stand for." The bellboy beamed, while the rest of the staff exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from guilt to determination. Mr. Reynolds turned back to the manager. "From today forward, I want changes. Real changes. Not just in policies, but in the way we approach our work. Training programs, discussions. Whatever it takes to make sure that every guest who walks through these doors feels like they belong." The manager nodded vigorously. "Of course, sir. Consider it done." As the tension in the room began to ease, Mr. Reynolds glanced toward the front desk clerk, who still looked stricken. "And you," he said gently, "you made a mistake, but I believe you can learn from it. Just remember this, people are more than what you see on the surface. Take the time to look deeper. You might be surprised by what you find." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't forget this." With that, Mr. Reynolds picked up his duffel bag and slung it over his shoulder. He turned toward the lobby's center, his gaze sweeping over the grand space he had built from nothing. It was still beautiful, still everything he had dreamed of. But now it was clear that its true potential had yet to be realized. As he made his way toward the elevator, the staff and guests watched in silence, their hearts heavy with the weight of the moment. For the first time, they truly understood the man behind the hat and the values he had built his empire upon. The Grand Empress Hotel's opulent lobby buzzed with its usual symphony of activity, the soft murmur of conversations, the clinking of fine china from the adjacent cafe, and the gentle strains of classical music wafting through the air. Guests lounged on plush velvet sofas, while staff in crisp uniforms attended to their every need with practiced grace. The marble floors gleamed under the ambient lighting, reflecting the grandeur that the establishment was renowned for. Amidst this orchestrated elegance, the atmosphere subtly shifted as Mr. Reynolds, the hotel's owner, stood at the front desk, his presence commanding attention. The revelation of his identity had sent ripples through the staff, their previous composure now tinged with unease. The front desk clerk, who had previously turned him away due to his MAGA hat, stood with her head slightly bowed, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The manager, usually the epitome of confidence, now fidgeted with the hem of his jacket, his gaze darting nervously between Mr. Reynolds and the assembled staff. Mr. Reynolds took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the faces before him. He could see a mixture of emotions: guilt, apprehension, curiosity, and a hint of defensiveness. He knew that this moment was pivotal not just for him, but for the entire ethos of the Grand Empress. Clearing his throat, he began, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "Yesterday," he started, "I walked into this hotel, the very establishment I envisioned and brought to life, and I was judged not for my character, not for my actions, but for a piece of clothing I chose to wear." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The staff shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the previous day's actions pressing heavily upon them. "This hat," he continued, gently touching the brim of his MAGA cap, has become a symbol that evokes strong emotions. I understand that, but it's essential to remember that behind every symbol, every article of clothing, is a human being with a story, with beliefs, with dignity. The front desk clerk's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but then closed it, seemingly unable to find the right words. The manager took a tentative step forward, his voice trembling slightly as he addressed Mr. Reynolds. Sir, we deeply regret the way you were treated. It was never our intention to make you feel unwelcome or disrespected. Mr. Reynolds turned his gaze to the manager, his expression softening slightly. I appreciate your apology, he replied. But this isn't just about me. It's about the culture we've cultivated here. The Grand Empress was built on the principles of inclusivity, respect, and excellence. If we start making judgments based on appearances or personal beliefs, we undermine the very foundation of what this establishment stands for. A murmur of agreement rippled through the staff. The bellboy, who had previously shown kindness to Mr. Reynolds, stepped forward, his youthful face earnest. Mr. Reynolds, he began, I believe that most of us strive to uphold the values you've instilled. But sometimes, in the heat of the moment, we falter. Yesterday was a lesson for all of us, a reminder to look beyond the surface and see the person within. Mr. Reynolds nodded appreciatively at the young man. Thank you, he said warmly. Your actions yesterday exemplified the true spirit of the Grand Empress. It's a reminder that while policies are essential, it's the individual actions of each staff member that define our reputation. Turning his attention back to the assembled staff, Mr. Reynolds continued, his tone resolute. Moving forward, I want to implement comprehensive training programs that focus not just on service excellence, but also on cultural sensitivity and implicit bias. We must ensure that every guest, regardless of their background or beliefs, feels valued and respected. The manager nodded vigorously. Absolutely, sir. We'll begin organizing workshops and seminars immediately. This will be a top priority. The front desk clerk, her voice barely above a whisper, finally spoke, her words trembling with emotion. Mr. Reynolds, I am profoundly sorry for my actions. I let my personal biases cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I failed to uphold the values of this establishment. I promise to learn from this experience and to do better. Mr. Reynolds regarded her with a gentle yet firm expression. Apology accepted. Growth comes from acknowledging our mistakes and committing to change. I trust that you'll embody the principles of the Grand Empress moving forward. As the confrontation drew to a close, the atmosphere in the lobby began to lighten. The staff, though chastened, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Guests who had observed the exchange whispered among themselves, some nodding in approval, others reflecting on the lessons imparted. Mr. Reynolds took a step back, surveying the opulent surroundings of the lobby. The chandeliers cast a warm glow, illuminating the intricate designs of the ceiling. The grand staircase, with its ornate railings, spiraled gracefully to the upper floors. Every detail, from the polished marble floors to the carefully curated artwork adorning the walls, spoke of luxury and meticulous attention. Yet, amidst this grandeur, he was reminded that the true essence of the Grand Empress lay not in its physical opulence, but in the warmth and respect extended to every individual who walked through its doors. As he prepared to depart, the bellboy approached him once more, a hesitant smile on his face. Mr. Reynolds, he began, if you ever need assistance or have any requests during your stay, please don't hesitate to ask. We're here to serve. Mr. Reynolds returned the smile, placing a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. Thank you, he replied. It's dedicated individuals like you who make this establishment truly exceptional. With that, he turned and made his way toward the grand entrance. The staff and guests, watching his departure with a newfound respect and understanding. The events of the past 2 days had left an indelible mark on the Grand Empress Hotel, serving as a poignant reminder of the importance of empathy, respect, and the unwavering commitment to the values upon which it was built. In the weeks following the pivotal encounter at the Grand Empress Hotel, a profound transformation began to unfold within its opulent walls. The staff, once ensnared by unconscious biases and superficial judgments, embarked on a journey toward genuine inclusivity and cultural sensitivity. Recognizing the necessity for change, Mr. Reynolds initiated comprehensive cultural sensitivity, training for all employees. These sessions delved into understanding diverse cultural norms, effective communication strategies, and the importance of viewing each guest as an individual beyond mere appearances. Interactive workshops, role-playing scenarios, and open discussions became integral components of this training, fostering an environment where staff could confront and address their biases. The training emphasized the significance of personalized service, teaching employees to anticipate and respect the unique preferences of international guests. For instance, understanding dietary restrictions such as halal or vegetarian requirements enabled staff to tailor their service, ensuring guests felt valued and at ease. To further support this cultural shift, the hotel integrated technology to assist staff in delivering culturally sensitive service. An internal database was developed, providing insights into various cultural customs, traditions, and guest preferences. This resource became invaluable, especially for new employees, offering quick access to information that could enhance guest interactions. Additionally, the hotel implemented a feedback system where guests could share their experiences and suggest improvements. This real-time feedback allowed the staff to adapt and refine their approach continually, ensuring that the commitment to inclusivity was not static but evolved with the needs of the guests. The impact of these initiatives soon became evident. Staff members approached each guest with renewed respect and curiosity, seeking to understand their individual stories and needs. The front desk clerk, who had previously judged Mr. Reynolds based on his attire, became a leading advocate for inclusivity, often sharing her experiences during training sessions to illustrate the dangers of snap judgments. Guests began to notice and appreciate the shift. Reviews highlighted the warmth and personalized attention they received, with many international visitors expressing gratitude for the staff's cultural awareness and respect for their customs. The hotel's reputation flourished, attracting a more diverse clientele eager to experience its renowned hospitality. Mr. Reynolds remained deeply involved in this transformative process. He held regular meetings with staff to discuss progress, challenges, and areas for improvement. His presence served as a constant reminder of the hotel's foundational values and the importance of upholding them. He also shared his personal journey, emphasizing that symbols like his MAGA hat carried different meanings for different people. By sharing his perspective, he encouraged open dialogues about assumptions and the importance of understanding the individual behind any symbol or attire. The changes at the Grand Empress did not go unnoticed by the broader hospitality industry. Other establishments began to seek guidance on implementing similar cultural sensitivity programs. The hotel hosted workshops and seminars, sharing their experiences and best practices, contributing to a more inclusive hospitality environment industry-wide. Industry publications featured the Grand Empress as a case study in successful cultural transformation, highlighting the tangible benefits of embracing diversity and inclusivity. The hotel's approach became a model for others, aiming to enhance their guest experience through cultural awareness. For the employees, this journey was not just about professional development, but also personal growth. They became more attuned to their biases, learned the value of empathy, and developed a deeper appreciation for the rich tapestry of human experience. The workplace evolved into a space of mutual respect and continuous learning. The bellboy, who had initially shown kindness to Mr. Reynolds, was promoted to a supervisory role, where he mentored new employees on the importance of cultural sensitivity and personalized service. His story became emblematic of the positive change that the hotel had undergone. The Grand Empress Hotel's transformation serves as a testament to the power of introspection, education, and unwavering commitment to core values. By confronting and overcoming its shortcomings, the hotel not only redeemed itself in the eyes of its owner, but also set a precedent for the entire industry. It stands as a beacon of inclusivity, proving that true luxury lies in honoring and celebrating the diversity of all who pass through its doors. This journey underscores the importance of cultural sensitivity in hospitality,